Silence used to be my enemy, a heavy, suffocating gray blanket that descended over my life the moment Martha took her last breath. But sitting here in the dim light of her study with this small velvet box in my hand, I realize that silence was actually a mercy. I stare at the device resting on the black velvet. It looks insignificant, a tiny, flesh-colored piece of plastic and circuitry, smaller than the tip of my pinky finger. It seems impossible that something so small could hold the weight of the world inside it. I am 78 years old. I am a retired vascular surgeon. My hands, which once possessed the steadiness to stitch the aorta of a premature infant, now rest on the mahogany desk, trembling with the rhythmic, uncontrollable tremor of Parkinson's. For the last 2 years, my world has been a muffled haze. My hearing deteriorated so rapidly after the funeral that doctors called it grief-induced sensory neural loss, a fancy way of saying my body was trying to shut out a world that no longer had my wife in it. I pick up the device. My fingers fumble with it, the tremor fighting me, but I manage to slip it into my left ear. It seats with a soft click. Then the world rushes in. The grandfather clock in the hallway, which I haven't heard in 18 months, suddenly booms like a cannon. Tick, tock, tick, tock. The refrigerator in the kitchen hums with an aggressive electrical vitality. Rain lashes against the window pane, sounding sharp and violent, like handfuls of gravel thrown against the glass. I close my eyes. I can hear. 3 days ago, Dr. Aris in Zurich told me this prototype was experimental. He told me it might not work. But sitting here, listening to the house settle around me, I realize it works too well. I hear the floorboards creak upstairs. I hear the wind howling through the chimney. I hear the ghost of the man I used to be, whispering that it is time to rejoin the living. I smile, a rare expression these days. I think of Elena, my daughter, my beautiful, ambitious Elena. I imagine her face tonight at Sunday dinner. I imagine the look of shock and then pure joy when I answer her whisper. I was an old fool. I leave the house an hour later. I make a production of it. I put my old broken hearing aids in my ears, bulky, beige things that haven't worked properly in 6 months. They are my camouflage. I button my coat wrong. I shuffle. I let the Parkinsons dictate my gait. I am playing a role, the role they have cast me in, the confused, decaying patriarch. I arrive at Elena's house at 6 o'clock sharp. I bought this house for her 10 years ago as a wedding gift. It is a sprawling colonial in the best school district, paid for with 40 years of on-call shifts and missed holidays. I stand on the porch and ring the bell. I hear footsteps inside. I hear Greg, my son-in-law, groan. "He's early." Greg's voice comes through the heavy oak door, clear as a bell. "Great. Just open the door, Greg," Elena says. Her voice sounds tired. "And don't be an ass." My hand freezes on the cane. "Papers? What papers?" The door swings open. Elena stands there, wearing a smile that looks painted on. She leans in close to my face, her voice booming at a volume reserved for shouting across a construction site. "Hi, Dad. Come." She enunciates every syllable, stretching her mouth wide. It is the voice one uses for a toddler or a disobedient dog. It is a voice that strips away dignity layer by layer. "Hello, sweetheart," I say, keeping my voice soft, feigning the lack of volume control that often comes with deafness. "Good to see you, too," she shouts. She grabs my arm, her grip firm, guiding me not with affection, but with the efficiency of a nurse moving a patient. "Come, sit." She leads me to the dining room. The table is set for 3, but my place is at the far end, exiled near the kitchen door. Greg is already seated. He doesn't look up from his phone. He is a handsome man in a superficial way, with the capped teeth and tan skin of a real estate developer who spends more time at lunch than at job sites. "Hello, Greg," I say, lowering myself into the chair. It takes effort. My knees ache. Greg waves a hand in the air without looking up. He speaks at a normal volume, assuming I can't hear him. He turns to Elena. "Did you check the wine cellar?" "He forgot it," Elena says, sitting opposite him. "Useless," Greg mutters. I unfold my napkin. My heart is hammering against my ribs, a painful, frantic rhythm. I want to speak up. I want to say, "I am right here. I am a person." But I stay silent. I need to know. The curiosity is a cold knot in my stomach. Dinner is served. Roast beef and tomato soup. Elena pours the wine, a bottle she must have taken from my cellar the last time she visited. I recognize the label. It's a 1982 Bordeaux I was saving for my 80th birthday. "This is decent," Greg says, taking a large gulp. I reach for my spoon. The tremor in my right hand is bad tonight. The stress makes it worse. The spoon chatters against the bowl. Clink, clink, clink. I try to lift the soup to my mouth. The liquid sloshes. A drop of red tomato bisque lands on my chin. I reach for a napkin, but I am too slow. A second drop hits my shirt collar. "Jesus," Greg says, putting his fork down with a heavy sigh. "Look at him. He's spilling it on himself again." "Greg, stop," Elena says, but there is no heat in her defense. "No, look at it, Elle," Greg continues, pointing at me with his knife. "It's like eating with a dying animal. He's drooling. He's shaking. It ruins my appetite." I freeze. The spoon hovers halfway to my mouth. I stare at the tomato soup, red like blood. I force myself to keep moving. I force the spoon to my lips. I swallow. It tastes like ash. "Hello, sweetheart," I say, pouring herself more of my wine. "It won't be much longer. Dr. Aris called me yesterday. He said the Parkinson's is accelerating faster than we thought."
The cognitive decline is starting to show. I look at my daughter. This is the girl I carried on my shoulders at the zoo so she could see the giraffes. This is the woman whose tuition at Yale I paid for without blinking. This is the bride I walked down the aisle, wiping tears from my eyes because I was so happy she had found love. I realized in that moment, watching her swirl the wine in her glass, that she wasn't waiting for me to die. She was actively rooting for it. She was banking on it. If you have ever poured your life into a child, sacrificed your sleep, your dreams, and your savings, only to realize they see you as nothing more than an obstacle between them and their inheritance, you know the coldness that spread through my chest right then. It is a coldness deeper than winter. If you believe that loyalty should mean something, that family shouldn't just be a waiting game for a payout, hit that subscribe button. Because I am telling you right now, I didn't break. I didn't cry. I decided to listen. "Speaking of the unit," Greg says, cutting into a steak, "what's the timeline on the power of attorney? The market is hot right now, Elle. If we can get him to sign the POA by next month, we can list the lake house before summer. That's $2 million easy. I need that liquidity for the Vegas project." My hand grips the tablecloth beneath the edge of the table. The lake house. Martha's sanctuary. She designed that house. Her ashes are scattered in the rose garden by the water. They want to sell it for a Vegas gamble. Elena hesitates. For a second, I hope it is out of love. "He's stubborn, Greg," she says instead. "You know how he is about independence. He won't sign the POA unless he thinks it's for his medical care." Greg laughs. It is a wet, ugly sound. "So we lie. It's simple. We slip the POA in with the insurance forms. We tell him it's a standard liability waiver for his new medication. He can't hear the lawyer explain it anyway. He just nods at everything like a bobblehead. He's a vegetable, Elle. I don't know, Elena says, chewing her lip. Mr. Sterling is his lawyer. Sterling is old, too, Greg scoffs. We'll bring our own notary. My buddy Mike will do it. He won't ask questions. Once we have the signature, we liquidate the lake house, we move the portfolio into the joint trust, and we put them in the facility. It's the best thing for everyone. I sit there, chewing flavorless meat, feeling the vibration of their voices in my bones. I am a surgeon. I have cut people open. I have seen the messy reality of the human body. But I have never seen anything as ugly as the inside of my daughter's ambition. Elena asks, the sapphire set? Sell it, Greg says. He won't notice. He thinks he lost his glasses half the time. Elena asks. My heart stops. Buster, my golden retriever. He is 10 years old. He sleeps at the foot of my bed. Since Martha died, he is the only living thing that touches me with affection. The dog goes, Greg says firmly. No nursing home takes a 70-pound dog, and I'm not taking him. Elena asks. No, Greg says, wiping his mouth with the linen napkin. He's old. He's got hip dysplasia. Just take him to the vet and tell them he's suffering. Put him to sleep. Put him to sleep. Kinder. I gripped the tablecloth so hard my knuckles turned white. The tremor in my hand vanishes, replaced by a rigid muscular tension that travels up my arm and into my neck. They are going to kill my dog. They are going to sell my wife's grave. They are going to lock me in a room to rot so Greg can play developer in Las Vegas. I realized then that the silence I had lived in for 2 years was a blessing compared to the noise of their betrayal. The clarity of the implant is excruciating. Every word is a scalpel slicing through the illusion of my life. Dad, are you? Elena shouts, leaning toward me again. I look up. I look at Greg. I look at his shark-like smile, his arrogance, his absolute certainty that I am nothing more than a checkbook with a pulse. I don't scream. I don't flip the table. I don't throw the wine in his face, though God knows I want to. I finish my bite of potato. I wipe my mouth meticulously. I fold my napkin and place it next to my plate. I stand up. It is painful, but I force my spine straight. I look Greg dead in the eye. I hold his gaze. For a moment, the room goes quiet. Greg falters. He sees something in my eyes he hasn't seen in years. He sees the surgeon. He sees the man who used to hold life and death in his hands. For a moment, Elena asks, her voice dropping to a normal volume in her confusion. I say nothing. I just smile. It isn't a happy smile. It is a sad, knowing smile. It is the smile of a man who has just diagnosed a terminal cancer and knows there is only one way to cut it out. I turn and shuffle to the door. I exaggerate the limp. I keep my head down. Weird, Greg mutters behind me. Did you see him look at me? He's just confused, Elena sighs. Go start the car, Greg. I walk out onto the front porch. The night air is cool and crisp. The crickets are singing in the bushes. Chirp, chirp, chirp. It sounds like a symphony. It sounds like war drums. I look up at the moon. I take a deep breath, filling my lungs with air that tastes of rain and ozone. I am not deaf. And now, neither is my conscience. The week that followed was not lived. It was performed. I became an actor on the stage of my own demise, playing the role of the tragic, decaying patriarch, while my mind operated with the cold, surgical precision of a scalpel. I had spent 40 years in operating theaters, navigating the most delicate architectures of the human body, knowing that a single tremor, a single moment of hesitation could bleed a life dry. I applied that same discipline now. I became a spy in my own life, gathering the evidence that would excise the rot from my family tree.
On Tuesday, I hired Mrs. Khan.
Higgins, a retired court stenographer with hearing sharp enough to catch a whisper across a crowded room. We sat in the corner booth of the Red Oak Diner, obscured by a heavy partition and the bustle of the lunch rush. I wore a hat pulled low and reading glasses I didn't need. Mrs. Higgins sat opposite me, her fingers hovering over her machine, ready to transcribe the betrayal. Elena and Greg arrived 12 minutes late. I watched them through the crack in the partition. They didn't look like villains. They looked like a successful young couple, Greg in his tailored suit, Elena checking her makeup in a compact mirror. That was the horror of it. Evil doesn't always wear a mask. Sometimes it wears your daughter's face. "He's clueless, Greg," Elena said, her voice carrying over the clatter of silverware. "I went over the bank statements yesterday while he was napping. There's almost $3 million in the liquid portfolio alone." Mrs. Higgins typed, her fingers moving in a silent blur. Click, click, click. Greg asked, biting into a sandwich. "I have a buyer lined up. Cash offer. He wants to tear it down and build condos, but who cares?" I felt a phantom pain in my chest, sharp and hot. Tear it down. Martha's garden. The porch where we watched the sunsets. To them, it was just dirt and lumber. It was just numbers on a spreadsheet. "We have to be careful with the notary," Elena said, her voice lowering slightly, though not enough to hide from me. "He won't," Greg scoffed. "He can't hear you, Elle. He nods at the wall. He smiles when the dog barks. The man is gone." I looked at Mrs. Higgins. She paused, her eyes meeting mine with a profound, watering sadness. She didn't pity me. She grieved for me. I nodded once, a signal for her to keep typing. I needed every word. I needed the full transcript of their cruelty. On Thursday afternoon, I visited James Sterling. James is more than my attorney. He is the man whose triple bypass I performed 20 years ago when other surgeons said the risk was too high. He owes me his life, and he has never let me forget it. I walked into his office without the cane. I stood straight. When the door closed, I looked at him and said, "Hello, James." He dropped his pen. He stared at me, then at the hearing aid sitting on his desk, then back at me. He whispered. "I can hear you, James," I said, my voice steady. "I can hear everything." When I played him the audio from Sunday dinner and showed him the transcript from the diner, James didn't speak. He took off his glasses and wiped his eyes. He wept, not for the legality of it, but for the friendship. "I'm so sorry, Arthur," he said, his voice thick. "Don't be sorry," I said, feeling a cold calm settle over me. "Be expensive." We spent 6 hours drafting the documents. We created a revocable living trust that was a masterpiece of legal retribution. We drafted a new will. And we prepared the trap. On Friday afternoon, I sent the text. My hands didn't shake, but I typed as if they did, adding typos and confused syntax. "Elena, doctor says I need help. Ready to sign the med papers. Come Sunday dinner. Bring the man with the stamp." Her reply came 3 seconds later. "Great, Dad. We'll be there. Love you." Love you. The words looked like venom on the screen. Sunday arrived with a heavy gray sky. I spent the afternoon in the kitchen preparing the roast beef exactly the way Martha used to make it. I set the table with the good china. I polished the silver. I went down to the cellar and retrieved a bottle of the 1982 Bordeaux. I placed it in the center of the table, a dark glass obelisk waiting for its moment. At 7 p.m. exactly, the doorbell rang. I put the old hearing aids in. I slumped my shoulders. I shuffled to the door, letting my feet drag on the hardwood. When I opened it, the energy of their greed hit me like a physical wave. They were vibrating with it. Greg was wearing a suit that cost more than my first car, his smile bright and predatory. Elena was holding a folder so tightly her knuckles were white. Elena shouted, leaning into my face. The smell of her perfume was cloying. "We are." "Hello, dear," I mumbled, staring at her chin. "Come in."
We moved to the dining room. They didn't want to eat, they wanted to feed. Greg placed the folder on the table, right next to the roast beef. He didn't even pretend to be interested in dinner. "Let's just get this done, Arthur," he said in his normal voice, assuming I was deaf to his impatience. "Dad," Elena yelled, "just sign here, for the doctor." She pointed to the signature line. I looked at the document. It wasn't for a doctor. It was a durable general power of attorney, effective immediately. It granted them total unilateral control over my bank accounts, my real estate, my medical decisions, and my estate. It was a death warrant for my freedom, drafted in Standard Times New Roman. "Is this?" I asked, my voice slurring, my hand trembling as I reached for the pen. The notary, Mike, shifted his weight. He looked at his shoes. It's the papers your daughter prepared, sir, for your—" He knew. He was part of it, but his conscience was still whispering to him. Greg had no such problem. "Yes, Arthur," Greg said, grinning at Elena. "It's for the pills." I picked up the pen. It felt heavy, like a weapon. I hovered the tip over the paper. I let the tremor in my hand shake the pen back and forth, creating a jagged ghost of a line in the air. Greg was practically salivating. He exchanged a look with Elena, a look of triumph, of shared victory. "We won," that look said. "The old man is finished." I took a deep breath. I let the tremor stop. I held the pen perfectly still. "Actually," I said. My voice didn't slur. It didn't waver. It dropped an octave, resonating with the sharp, commanding baritone that had commanded operating rooms for 40 years. It was the voice of a surgeon demanding a scalpel.
The silence that slammed into the room was absolute. It was heavy, suffocating, sucking the air out of the space. The grandfather clock in the hall seemed to stop ticking. Elena pulled back, her eyes widening until they were circles of white. She whispered. I didn't look at her. I turned my head slowly, deliberately, and locked eyes with Greg. "And Greg," I continued, my diction crisp and perfect, enunciating every consonant. "The vintage was a 1982 Bordeaux. You really shouldn't have paired it with the fish last Sunday. It was distinctively—" I leaned forward, letting my gaze drill into him. "Like eating with a dying animal." Greg's face drained of blood. It happened instantly, the color vanishing as if I had severed an artery. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He looked like he had been shot. Elena stumbled back, her hand flying to cover her mouth. "I hear everything," I said. I stood up. I didn't use the table for support. I didn't hunch. I stood at my full height, 6 feet of righteous anger. I walked to the sideboard, picked up a small remote control, and pressed the only button on it. The room filled with sound. High fidelity, crystal clear audio boomed from the hidden speakers. "He's a vegetable, El. We'll put the dog to sleep." The recording played on, a litany of their sins echoing off the walls of the home they planned to sell. The audio was crisp, undeniable, brutal. Greg shouted, his voice cracking, panic rising in his throat like bile. "You can't record us!" "In this state, in my home, I certainly can," I replied calmly. I picked up the power of attorney papers. I walked to the fireplace, where a log was burning brightly. I tossed the documents onto the flames. The paper curled, blackened, and vanished. Their greed turned to ash in seconds. The kitchen door swung open. James Sterling stepped out, holding a thick blue folder. He didn't look at Elena or Greg. He looked at me, nodding once. "This," I said, pointing to the folder James placed on the table, "is the new revocable living trust." I placed my hand on it. "It places all my assets, the house, the lake property, the brokerage accounts, the liquid portfolio,
into a charitable foundation dedicated to Parkinson's research and elderly legal defense. I looked at Elena. She was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks. But they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of a gambler who had bet the house and lost. Her head snapped up. Hope, pathetic and desperate, flickered in her eyes. "Yes," I said. Greg let out a choked sound of disbelief. "Contingent," I continued, ignoring him, "on you completing 20 hours of community service every single month at the Veterans Nursing Home downtown. You will change bedpans. You will feed men who cannot feed themselves. You will listen to their stories. You will learn what it actually means to care for the elderly. James will audit your hours personally."
Greg asked, his hands balling into fists, his face twisting into a mask of rage. "What about my share?" "You," I said. I walked to the front door and threw it open. The night air rushed in, cold and clean. "You get nothing. You are trespassing. My security team is waiting at the gate. If you aren't off this property in 3 minutes, they have instructions to detain you for the police. We have the forgery attempts on tape, Greg. We have the conspiracy to commit fraud documented." Greg looked at the door, then at me. He looked for the weak old man he had mocked last week. He didn't find him. He found a wall of iron. He grabbed his jacket and stormed out without a word to his wife. He saved himself, just as I knew he would. Elena stood there for a moment longer. She looked at me, then at the fire, then at the trust document. "Dad," she whispered. "I know you're sorry," I said softly, "but sorry doesn't rewrite the will, Elena." She left. She didn't scream. She didn't fight. She shrank. She walked out the door looking small, petty, and utterly defeated. I watched their taillights disappear down the long driveway, red eyes fading into the dark. I closed the heavy oak door. Click. The house was quiet again. But it wasn't the heavy, lonely silence of the death. It wasn't the terrifying silence of isolation. It was the peaceful, clean silence of a man who has taken out the trash. I walked back to the dining room. I poured myself a glass of the 1982 Bordeaux. I sat in my armchair by the fire. I heard the crackle of the wood, sharp and bright. I heard the wind sighing against the eaves. And then I heard the heavy, rhythmic thumping of a tail against the floorboards. Buster looked up at me from his spot on the rug, his golden eyes full of trust. He let out a long, contented snore. I took a sip of the wine. It tasted like justice. I closed my eyes and listened to the dog breathe. It was the most beautiful sound in the world.